Last time we covered the first of the Mauser Model 1893 family. Today, we'll actually see what would be just about the last, one that was adopted by Serbia. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is gold. This is the Serbian Mauser Model 1899. We thought we had a rare gun last time, but this is something entirely different. I'm very happy to say that we're going to go put it in the light box. With an overall length of 48.6 inches and weighing in at 8.8 pounds, this is nearly identical in handling to last time's episode, the Ottoman 1893, except while we do have a 5-round staggered magazine, it now chambers the 7x57mm Mauser cartridge and has no cutoff. In order to talk about the Serbian Mauser, we'll first have to talk about Serbia. I had rather hoped to cover it sooner, but we've sadly been unable to borrow their first rifle. You see, Serbia gained independence after a series of battles with the Ottoman Empire, their previous governors. That ended in 1878. The new nation wanted to standardize their arms, and they chose, fairly wisely for the time, the Mauser 1871. Sort of. We've covered a bit about this in our previous episodes on the 71 and 7184, but the Serbian Commission went for an improved single-shot black powder Mauser in 1880. During all these proceedings, Serbian Major Kosta Koko Milovanovic got to work closely with Paul and Wilhelm Mauser. He would eventually marry the latter's daughter in 1884. His role in rifle development was mostly centered on the ammunition. Now, we're not going into detail here and now, but I will say this sort of relationship formed a bridge between Serbia and the German arms makers, one that held despite a number of political changes over the years. It's also worth noting that Georg Luger was also an influence in Serbia. A strong supporter of German arms interests in the region, he was key to their adoption of the Maxim as produced by DWM, obviously some years after this early Mauser. Luger himself was known to have shared vital arms information about the Ottomans, Bulgarians, Romanians, Greeks, and even the Russians with the Serbian government up to 1914. So yeah, Serbian officials liked the Germans, and for the most part, they would be, thanks to political ambitions, put on opposite sides of the Great War. In its early years, the country could not decide between allegiances to the two great powers. Milan I of Serbia, who would rise to the throne in 1882, was an Austrian loyalist, but his subjects were mostly interested in Russian-influenced pan-Slavism. This sentiment of Slavic nationalism wasn't embraced in Austria-Hungary. The dual monarchy felt they should wield the most power or even direct rule in the Balkans. So this Russian versus Austro-Hungarian influence thing would kick around for decades and put Serbia into a tight spot with its neighbors, both great and minor powers, eyeing its borders and people as possible conquests. So a campaign of modernization was taken up, and taxes frankly soared. This would kick off a number of problems, but they were suppressed for the most part. A lot of these improvements were aimed at the armed forces in attempts to bulk up enough to resist possible Austro-Hungarian incursion. In addition to modern equipment, Serbia took the Montenegrin method of compulsory service, although it was a bit more advanced than a militia. Honestly, this should seem vaguely familiar. Their first poziv, or ban, started at age 21. It had a peacetime officer corps, small active army, and some reserves. You served for 10 years and then moved to the second poziv. Fit male citizens remained in this class until their 38th birthday. They would form a sort of militia and provide replacement troops for any frontline losses. From 38 to 45, they were enrolled in the third poziv, or basically the reserves, meant for lines of communication and home defense. There was also a last defense army, which included ages 18 to 20 and 45 to 50. The younger could be rushed through training. The elder could fill out non-combat roles like supply and clerical duty. Now, in order to keep all these men armed, Serbia would need rifles. The 1880 had been great, but by the 1890s it was pretty well dated. In 1891, The War Office formed a commission to select a new rifle. After 2 years of observation and testing, they settled on the very new Mauser 1893, particularly the Spanish version in 7x57mm Mauser. Again, this fast-moving, flat-shooting wonder cartridge with good balance between power, accuracy, and recoil certainly was a good choice and strong contender for one of the best military cartridges of all time. So Serbia wanted to purchase some 100,000 rifles, but financing would fall through and nothing really came of the matter for a number of years. Instead, they would have to approach Russia in hopes of adopting their new Mosin 1891 with some financial help. But again, they were turned away, likely from Russian production needs, and again, nobody wanted to float their bills. A lot of these woes were actually being caused by Austria-Hungary, who wanted Serbia as a satellite power and would use their political power to sabotage Serbian relationships with any foreign banks or possible trade partners. As time passed, the Mausers continued to improve, evolving into what is recognized as the 1895 pattern, a kissing cousin to the 1893. 1895s have a number of minor variants, but the gun is typified by a Chilean 1895, which I do actually happen to have. Oh, that's my Ottoman. Don't want to get confused. Haha, right here. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this particular gun before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Whew, this girl's got a little dirt on her, but I think she'll serve our purposes. Overall, you'd be hard-pressed to find a difference between this and a regular 1893 like we saw last time. Non-Ottoman guns didn't tend to have a magazine cutoff, and it has, like we saw last episode, the updated bolt stop / clip bridge system, so all that's fine. What really stands out today are just a couple things. One, the bolt face is back to round, simpler to manufacture, and certainly no problem with feeding. And two, most critically, if we look right here, let me get my patented plastic pokey, there is a little uptick of metal right there. That was not on our previous gun. As a matter of fact, you may be confused without seeing it. So let me grab that Ottoman, which is why I had it handy. There we go. See? Nothing here. No extra metal. And so what that provides is just an emergency locking lug. So when I turn down the bolt handle, not only are we locked at the front, we also have the bolt handle root itself up against a piece of metal, just a little extra strength just in case something goes wrong. That really is the key difference. Okay, so as the gun evolved, the Serbian Commission would keep updating their wishes. Also over time, Serbian growth and martial reorganization led to a demand moving up to 130,000 frontline rifles instead of just 100,000. Playing a bit more wisely, Serbia would eventually secure a loan, this time from the Union Bank of Vienna for 30 million gold dinars. Now, the bulk of this fund was to go to the purchase of modern Mausers. It had only taken until 1899 to sort all of this out. They went to pull the trigger, as it were, and found that the bank was now only dispersing a little over a third of the loan, and the rest would come later. Austria was at it again. This meant they could only order 90,000 of the 130,000 rifles they needed, and their ammunition desire of 1,000 rounds per rifle was cut in half. But still, they ordered the guns. Again, Mauser-Oberndorf was engaged in other production, so Ludwig Lova... oh wait, no, not Lova. Don't forget, in 1896, Ludwig Lova would expand, consolidate, spin off some bits, and become Deutsche Waffen- and Munitionfabriken. So DWM would pick up the contract, and by June of 1899, finally, the first 100 rifles were ready, along with 20,000 cartridges. These were inspected on site, but also shipped to Serbia via rail. They were, of course, held by Austria-Hungary over some insane permitting requirements. This stalled everything for 2 more months. Anyway, while I'm at it, they did adopt a new bayonet. These were produced by Simpson and Company in a separate contract and are pretty straightforward single-edged knife pattern bayonets. Anyway, the supply eventually gets flowing, and by the end of 1900, all 90,000 are in the hands of the Serbian government, who immediately puts them into training and field use. So that gives us the model 1899, our gun today. They sport a Serbian crest and model number over the chamber. The left side of the receiver has a legend denoting German Arms and Ammunition Factory, Berlin. And since we have our gun today, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay, this is going to look very familiar. We've got another straight wrist long boy with a half hand guard, and then, I mean, look at this, guys. It's exactly the same gun you've seen 3 times now, between the Ottoman 1893, the Chilean 1895, and this guy, right? A couple differences. One, we have the Chilean style improvements here. Well, actually, Mauser 1893 from Spain improvements here. We have the upgraded bolt stop. We have the tapered ridge set stripper clip pattern. We have still a cock on close, even though we're adopted after the introduction. So look at my, I always struggle to find ways to show you guys things. Cock on close, despite the now adoption of the German Gewehre 98. So this is sort of the last holdout for the 1893 pattern, which can be good because these are very slim by comparison. New to this gun, however, well, let's roll her back because technically this is an older pattern sight with a single button instead of the other. There'd actually be some problems with this that we'll cover in a moment. This does not have what we were hoping to find on the Ottoman ones, which was that flip up sort of quick sight. None of that stuff. It's just a regular adjustable ladder. If we get back to the rear, there is one cool improvement, which is that the left wall has actually been, shaped with a thumb cut to ease loading. That was not present on the earlier pattern, so it's a cool little addition. Markings, of course, are a little hard for you guys to read here. Much better in the photos that we did before. Disassembly, I know you guys like takedown, but it's the exact same as before. No need to show it today. Now, this gun does not have one feature that was original to its adoption. You see, the first 1893s and consequently the 1899s have an unsupported case section between the bolt face and the chamber. In the original 1893, the rear of the barrel is just flush, meaning a bit of the cartridge case is exposed. While not dire, it isn't ideal. The major issue here is that the rimless 7mm cartridge headspace is on the shoulder, and so the chamber depth matters a lot, and when it's off in a gun that already had some unsupported case length, well, you get failures. And within the first few months of adoption, Serbia started noticing this very issue. DWM had apparently not been super careful about their reaming, and Serbian Mausers were starting to see case failures or even head separations. Now, they could have gone after DWM for repairs, but it wouldn't really solve the core problem, one that would only return under excessive wear. They were also having issues with extractors deforming or breaking, likely from bulging or failed cases. Well, engineers at the Military Technical Institute in Kragujevik got to work. The solution? Turning the barrels back just a bit, and then deepening up and reshaping them at the rear, milling a circle at the end of the barrel and a rectangular cut for the extractor. They could fully support the case by deeply seating the entire cartridge and correct any headspace issues as they did this modification. This became known as the Ring of Steel. It was an improvement even over the German Gewehre 1898, which did not have this feature. Nor was it present on the 1907 export pattern, but it did appear on the 1910, which had been ordered by Serbia to bulk up their stock much later. The modification only cost the Serbian government 2.43 dinars a pop, which I assume is somewhat economical, but still something they didn't really want to spend money on to begin with. There is more to tell from here, but we're caught up on this gun as is. I'll skip the animation as it's just the same as last episode in terms of how it works, so let's get this over to Mae for a demonstration. you know, I'm going to say this feels just like a Spanish 1893. I can't foresee the difference. But we left off with the Ring of Steel modification, but that wouldn't be the only change to the Serbian 1899. Around the same time, they noticed this rear sight right here configuration. That's pretty fragile with the notches and the teeth wearing unevenly. Apparently Ottomans had the same problem. This resulted in poor engagement, and so they needed to take it on. Filip Petrovic over at Kregovic, I said those correctly, would design an improved latch. The old leaf had too much play, and the teeth set on the outside wore quickly. The new pattern was thicker set with a simpler push button instead of a tipping button, one that engaged the teeth to the inside of the ladder. This gun did not receive that upgrade, and it seems it was only done as needed, so not all that common. The Military Technical Institute didn't just modify barrels and sights. By 1902, they would also be producing ammunition. As Serbia wanted to avoid foreign dependence in time of war, I'd say this was a good call. Just to be clear, we're still at only 90,000 rifles of the desired 130,000. Thanks to the Spanish-American War, Serbia would be offered 10,000 Spanish Mauser 1893s, same chambered ammo, same practically everything. These were some of the great many captured by the US during the fight. They had been purchased by the famous Francis Bannerman, and were certainly compatible with Serbian inventory. They would have been a steal at 30 dinars a rifle. Unfortunately, Austria-Hungary, who is surprised that I said those words, was bullying again. They had locked Serbia into a series of ridiculous trade wars, messing with any attempts at loans, armaments, significant exports, etc. They would put pressure on Bannerman's Vienna agent, and the matter was dropped. In 1907, inventory from a US report, dated 1909, declared only 80,000 Mausers 1899. This may have been a typo, as 90,000 were still on hand in an earlier 1904 inventory. 75,000 Berdan 2s, a single-shot Russian black powder, were available, and 85,000 of those Mauser 1880 Kokas in 10.15 were still on hand. In the same report, the Serbian army claims the ability to field some 300,000 men, but due to shortages of officers and equipment, the US agent guesses at 250,000 total possible fieldable men. The hope was to arm the first Poziv with the Mauser 1899, the second with the Berdan, and the third with the Mauser Koka. Each was to have 1,000 rounds per rifle available to them. To make this happen, Serbia still needed their extra rifles, but the best they could manage was a loan out of France in December of 1906. This was for 95 million franc, 45 of which was earmarked for arms purchases. Finally, they could start to buy some replacement rifles. This time, they were forced to deal with OEWG in Steyr, Austria, which placated the Habsburgs enough to let the deal through. They would order 30,000 additional long rifles. These were priced 79 dinars a pop, including a bayonet this time. Which, by the way, is now a double-edged pattern, totally new. Also, I should say that the rifles did not remain exactly the same. These were the 9907s, and they had the improved chambers and Petrovic sights straight from the factory. In addition, they added a gas vent hole to the bolt body and have a beefed up sear. I sadly do not have one of these rifles handy today, but we can still get a feel for the markings. The Serbian crest was still there, now marked model 1899-07, and with a left side marking that translates to Austrian Arms Factory Steyr. Now, by this point we have two Mauser 1893 pattern Serbian long rifles, but 0 carbines. This, of course, would change. A second contract was let out for a shortened pattern, and that makes this, the Serbian model 1908 cavalry carbine. Let's get it over to the light box. With an overall length of 37 inches and some change and weighing in at 7 pounds, this is much handier than the long rifle. It has 5 7x57mm cartridges feeding from a stripper clip. Yeah, only 10,000 of these were ordered in the initial contract, which by the way was completed in 1909. Afterwards, some 1,030 rifles and carbines we're unsure how many of each type, would be purchased in small lots from OEWG. In 1911, the same thing would happen to the tune of 1,500 more. These were all likely deeply discounted manufacturing overruns. As we'll see, Serbia was not eager to give money to Austria. Anyway, that just means that this is the rarest of the Serbian 1899 family of arms, with a maximum possible count of 12,000, but probably not even hitting 11,000 total made. We're very lucky to have one here, so thank you, John, once again for your hard work. So let's go ahead and make some room, and we'll take a closer look at what is a very interesting little carbine. Oh ho ho, she is tiny and handy. So let's get to the rear. Number one, this has been lightly sanded on, unfortunately, and we've got some lipping here. It would be just a little bit beefier in its original configuration, but beggars and choosers, folks. We have, May will be so pleased by this, a semi-pistol grip stock. That is, frankly, quite a good upgrade. We'll wind her back. We have a turned down bolt. No additional checkering or cutting, though. I don't know if she'll be as happy there. We'll keep her going back. The action is the same. The handguard clip at the rear is the same, and it runs through this midpoint barrel band up to this flush nose cap. No provision for a bayonet lug. No clearing rod. No nothing. So pretty cool, right? Look at the sight protectors. We got our sight set down in there. Side slung for cavalry use. No undersling. This is pretty cool, and I'm going to tell you, it feels really good. Everything else is really the same, though. You saw the markings. We've got the same bolt action, same takedown. There's no real difference in the trigger, so there's not a lot for me to show you outside of this particular rear sight, which finally gives me a chance to show you the Petrovic compared to the earlier one. So let me get the other gun in here while I have the opportunity. So pop this guy out and set her down. Now, they're different sizes, obviously. The carbine is only sighted up to, let me check my readings here. It's like 1,500 meters, okay? But maybe 16 if you took it off the top. So, let me get where I have just enough room. If we look at this sight, we have notches on the outside right. And to engage them, we push down this way, down on this button and slide it. And then it locks flush again. This was the same on the Ottoman rifle from last time, okay? Now, the improved version for strength, make some room, is this little Petrovic. And so these would have been longer on the rifles, but same idea. We push in, not down, and the teeth are actually on the inside here. And so the idea is that the spring is constantly pushing that way. You push opposite in order to get it to slide up. It's much smoother, it's much more firm, and it engages very, very well and wears a lot better. It's a good little improvement. Now, just to show it to you again, that crest does read model 1908. Sidewall's pretty much the same. All right, we know what you're all thinking at this point in the story. How does this little guy shoot? Well, let's find out. I love this little guy. This thing is great. I should also, by the way, point out, I don't think I said at this point in the episode, the previous Ottoman 1893s had a magazine cutoff block, or magazine follower rising block. The Serbians don't. They just bolt forward. They apparently weren't worried and took care of that in training. When we left off, Serbia was buying 30,000 rifles and 10,000 of these little carbines from Austria. A third contract in the same order covered 50,000 new barrels for the 1899. And no, the earlier 1899s weren't that worn out yet, but the 1880s needed help. The Serbians started a program to convert their single-shot black powder large-bore Mausers into magazine repeaters, shooting the 7x57mm cartridge. This was not as insane as it sounds, as they did add forward locking surfaces, but I do not have an example handy, and I'm holding out to one day make an episode on these guns, so let me know if you see one, as they are probably the rarest Serbian gun I've ever heard of. The barrels, new rifles, and carbines were all done shipping in 1909, and Serbia immediately reached for another contract, as the converted rifles were honestly not doing so well. Having secured another French loan, they went to go shopping, but Austria-Hungary in the meantime had been up to their usual meddling, and their attack on the Serbian pork exports was too much. Serbia refused to place another large order in Steyr. This time they would go back to Mauser proper and the Model 1910. Being that this is a derivative of the Model 98, we won't be covering it in detail yet today. So how did the Model 1899 and friends do in battle? Well, apparently quite well despite the horrible odds. Their first real use would be in the 1912 First Balkan War, where Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro teamed up to kick the Ottomans out of Europe, which they did to great success. The spoils, however, were not to everyone's liking, and the Second Balkan War was started by Bulgaria turning on its former allies over territorial disputes. They were defeated by the combined forces of Serbia, Montenegro, Greece, and now Romania and even the Ottomans came back for a good swift kick. In both of these disputes, the Serbian Mauser was every bit as good or better than the rifles that the other players had on hand. It was pretty much pitted up against, say, the Mannlicher 1895, Mosin 1891, Mannlicher Schönauer, the Mannlicher 1893, and the Mauser 1903, at best from the Ottoman Empire. Now, of course, at many times these countries did not field their premier guns. All of them still had significant dependence on single-shot black powders, especially Ottoman Empire and Montenegro. All this activity, however, left Serbian military exhausted. Reports from June of 1914 show many frontline units were missing basic uniforms, had mixed supplies of rifles and ammunition. Many small arms were inoperable for missing parts. They had seized guns from the Ottomans and Bulgarians, which helped a bit, but added logistics issues because of all the different types of ammunition. Overall, Serbia was just not ready for war, and as we know, it was coming anyway. Following the assassination of Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914, the Habsburgs would send frankly ridiculous demands to Serbia. History seems to be split on just how much Serbia conceded. The general opinion is that they folded on nearly every point the Austrians pushed, except those that would fundamentally destroy their own sovereignty. Regardless, it was all pretext anyway, and Austria-Hungary would invade. War were declared. Now, the Balkan Front in the Great War makes for some very compelling history. It's full of mass attacks, fighting retreats, counterattacks, betrayals, reversals, and so forth. It's way outside our scope for today. So instead, let's just run down some very basics. Austria-Hungary would shell Belgrade on July 29th of 1914, but it would take until August 12th for their armies to cross the Drina River. 3 of 6 armies were mobilized, but one would be recalled partway through due to the Russians. Despite superior numbers and overall better equipment, the Austro-Hungarians rushed their attack, committing too few men and in hilly country. Austrian dreams of victory were dashed at Mount Steyr, where a successful Serbian defense led to chasing the invaders back across the Drina. Entente pressure meant Serbia would launch smaller attacks against the Habsburgs, but these didn't go so well for the poorly equipped Serbian army. So they retired to their borders, where they met a second massed attack and decided, after significant losses over months of really traditional trench fighting, to retreat, shortening their supply lines, consolidating their men, and providing resting rotations for those same dudes. This allowed them, by December, to mount a counteroffensive, which completely surprised the Austro-Hungarian forces and again routed them from the country. While stockpiles of fresh rifles and ammunition were captured, the effort was just too great. Serbia, in their victories to this point, had lost 170,000 troops to Austro-Hungary's 215,000. Yeah, technically they suffered less, but it's a Pyrrhic victory when you think of the scales of these countries. That winter, typhus would claim hundreds of thousands of lives in war-torn Serbia, civilian and soldiers alike. Serbia would, in fits and spurts, be rearmed by the Allies, taking on 120,000 Mosins and various French and Greek aid as well. Those forced to change from the Mausers to the Mosins, due to supply chain issues, were generally upset and found the Russian gun inferior, although this may be due to the Russians failing to tell them that they had been sighted with the bayonets attached, unlike the Serbian guns. So, since keeping the Mauser on the front line was preferred, the British would contract for 200,000 barrels and 7x57mm in the US. These were meant to repair existing rifles and convert captured Turkish Mausers over to the new pattern. They would not arrive in time. The same is true of the plum bayonets. 160,000 of these were ordered by Britain as aid to the Serbian army. They are marked plum for the US company which made them. Strangely, by this point in the war, Austria-Hungary wasn't so worried about Serbia. The smaller country wasn't much of an invading risk at their peak strength, and now they were crippled and stuck in their own borders. It would be better to concentrate on Russia, and apparently now Italy, their problem too. But Germany wanted a land bridge to the Ottomans, who were not equipped well enough to hold their entire empire and had limited domestic manufacture. So the matter was decided with a combined force. German, Austro-Hungarian, and Bulgarian troops attacked, crossing the Drina and Sava on October 7th of 1915. This one stuck, and the sheer size of the invaders broke the Serbian army and forced a retreat through Albania, where the fleeing troops were unfortunately set upon by tribal brigands, along with escaping civilians due to reprisals and killings by the Austro-Hungarians and Bulgarians. Altogether, perhaps 155,000 would escape through evacuation at the Adriatic Sea. Most of this batch were soldiers. Many of these men would return to fight another day with the help of French arms and equipment, but by then you're really not seeing a lot of these guns in their hands. Overall, roughly 30% of the Serbian population was killed during the war, and up to 60% of the male population was wiped out. Those are heavy costs for being the first into the fight. Returning to the guns, though, roughly 20,000 7x57mm Mausers of all types were evacuated with the Serbian troops. These were apparently going to be sent to Saint-Étienne for repair. I'm unsure if this ever actually happened. So what do we know about the 1899s now? Well, they are very good modern rifles, every bit the equal of their contemporaries. The Serbian soldiers seemed to perform well with them, repulsing 2 big Austrian pushes. Of course, this also had a lot to do with superior training, war experience, common language, home field advantage, artillery and rail support, and sheer grit. But these guns were also only about 1/3 of the rifles on the Serbian front line, and over time they'd represent about 1/4. While still the favorite, they were not the bulk of Serbia's defense. Today, the 1899 is extremely rare thanks to post-war conversion. Following World War I, Serbia would evolve into Yugoslavia and adopted the 7.92 by 57mm cartridge in 1929. Existing 1899s were shortened down and rechambered, making for the 1899C. With so many rifles lost to the war, and nearly all of what was left converted, this guy is a rare bird. We're lucky to have it here today to show you, and still luckier to have Mae to talk about her experience with both this long rifle and the little 1908 carbine. Once more, same as before, although ever so slightly different, we have the Serbian 1899. I'm going to get this over to your hands. It's going to probably be a lot like our Ottoman 1893, I think. As a matter of fact, I still have that right here. Noticeable difference? I can't do this.
Jelly?
They trusted the Serbians far more than they trusted the Ottoman troops to know whether or not they were out of ammo. All right, so other than that little factoid, what's going on differently in terms of the fit and feel of that gun?
You know, there's really not much of a difference, to be honest. The weight's pretty much the same. The feel is pretty much the same. The balance is pretty much the same. There are some minor differences, though. I will say this example, this particular Serbian is pretty worn. So unfortunately, things like the bolt-on close is stiffer. The safety is stiffer. It just even looks more worn. Doesn't quite look as pretty as the Ottoman 93. So unfortunately, you know.
After the story we told earlier in this episode, who'd imagine that those guns saw a lot of heavy, sustained use for months and even years on end? Oh yeah, those are hard to find in good condition, I imagine, because every single one of them was put into the field on the front line as much and often as possible. So yeah, not in nearly as tidy a shape, but that does give us a bit of a data point on how they do with wear. So have you been completely disappointed in how that gun has handled after being put through the ringer, as it were?
Yeah, don't get me wrong, this gun is incredibly worn out, but it is a testament to the 93 family in that I still did very well with it. I still shot very accurately with it. So that's pretty dang good. Now, interestingly enough, design-wise, there was a significant difference between this and the Ottoman 93 in that I was able to load cartridges into this gun much better. Like it was definitely a more secure like snag in there whenever I set the clip down, which was very nice. And even though I didn't really use it as well as I would have liked
it's
to,
like she has small thumbs or something.
No, yes, right, small thumbs. I just didn't necessarily use the notch that's milled into the metal over here, but it is kind of cool that it's there for, you know, people with big thumbs and all, like this guy over here. But yeah, honestly, I'm surprised at how well it did considering the condition it's in. That was very surprisingly pleasant.
Yeah, these guys are rugged guns. We're acting like this thing's completely blown out and that the bore's gone, and it's not that far gone, guys. It's just our 1893 Ottoman was in pretty dang good shape, and this is a Serbian. They were used. So it's not that it's torn up. Most of you would be perfectly comfortable picking this up and shooting it. There's just a little extra play. There's a little extra gumminess in terms of surface issues and things. A lot of this could be cleaned up, but the question becomes how much does the owner want to get into doing that? This is another one that Mark would probably argue about, but sometimes you want to show where a gun's been too, so that's another issue. But as it stands, very good handling, good shooting firearm despite heavy use, which is what you want. You want to be able to handle a sustained armed conflict with a military rifle. So in terms of shooting, that might be where this thing gets different because we have an ever so slightly different rear sight and we have a different cartridge, 7x57, the Spanish cartridge. How's that doing?
So yeah, difference in the sights. There is a little more noticeable difference in that even though these sights look a little more worn, I would honestly argue they're slightly cleaner. I think somehow these sights have managed to survive very well. The V-notch is very positive on this one, just as deep, and it doesn't really feel like my sight has increased in busyness. I would say looking at it, it just didn't look that different. If anything, just a little cleaner, which is nice. The trigger on this gun, I will say, I didn't want to mention that. It's a little bit rougher. Again, I think that's due to wear. That cartridge was beautiful, though. The recoil on this gun was pretty mild, surprisingly mild. I thought that was a nice change of pace.
Yeah, 7mm does an excellent job of throwing good weight, good speed, at sort of economical recoil. It's not that it's light. This wasn't an Arisaka. But you're really not imparting that much to your shoulder for how much you're getting downrange. It is by far one of my favorite cartridges before the Great War. That is a excellent, excellent service cartridge. So I thought it came out well on this gun. Obviously, you appreciated it. Follow-up feel good?
Yeah, honestly, I think it did very well. I was pretty accurate with it. I would argue just as accurate as I was with the Ottoman 93, so I really don't have any complaints there. Is it something I would consider taking into battle? Actually, yes, I would consider it not quite as strongly as the Ottoman 93, but it's pretty high up there. Yeah,
that's only because of the wear, though. If these were equal, which one would you pick of the two?
You know, that's interesting. I might actually choose this one, simply because I feel that I don't have the unnecessary feature of the mag cutoff. Loading on this one is much faster. And the sights really aren't that different. The feel is not that much different. It's interesting. You know, I just wish they came in carbine versions.
Okay, so yeah, I would definitely, let me take that back from you. I would take the 99 over the Ottoman 1893. I trust 7mm Spanish as a cartridge, and it's going to have milder recoil. The gun itself is in very good configuration, if not condition at this point, although I'm not taking this one over that one because they have different conditions. But from the factory, yeah, I would prefer this. And also, don't forget, we don't get to see it, but between the two, this has a stronger breech arrangement. This thing is less likely to have gas failures and cartridge failures. So overall, this is a actually measurably better gun than the Ottoman 1893, and even the Spanish 1893 in certain ways. So, let me get this set aside, because I think you had a special request, which is...
What? No.
Probably the rarest gun we've seen in the show to date. This is Serbian 1908 carbine. And again, thank you, John, for whatever witchcraft that you pulled to find one of these anywhere. But let me put that in your hands. So still in 7mm, still the same action. How do you feel about this guy?
Oh boy. I haven't sat down to really go over my list, my top list. I really haven't done it recently. We've been a little bit busy with recent projects and all. So I don't have like a positive list in my head of each gun with its specific number on its highest ranking for me. This gun is making me have to do that soon because it might be my top one. It's incredible. It really is. It's got a ton of features that are great about it. First off, carbine. Hello. It's already just in frame and I'm just sitting here. That's insane. I can't get over the weight. I can't get over the balance. It's got the semi-pistol grip. Yeah, unfortunately turned down bolt, but it's weirdly sticking out enough that it hasn't really been a problem. Cartridge is decent. Sights, I wish they were tangent sights, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess, in this one, but they're still clean read, nice V-notch. Safety is still standard flag. It's got a decent bolt release on the side. The trigger is good. It's good, solid 2-stage, very smooth. I'm liking this.
Yeah, this thing is a cock on open and rear aperture sight away from being perfection in her eyes, I guarantee it.
Actually, yeah, those are the two things that could make a very strong difference in this gun. That's it. That's really pretty much it. Oh, and the sight.
I said rear aperture sight.
Oh, you did. Yeah, okay. Anyway.
I mean, technically, by the way, the reason she's complaining about the leaf versus tangent in terms of your perspective from shooting it, there's no difference. It's in terms of like ruggedness, like how it's going to fail in the field or take damage. And it is a very short leaf. Let's give them that. This little leaf right here is far less likely to get banged on than the much larger rifle leaf. So
and they could have also given me more of a sight radius, a longer sight radius in this one. They backed it up a little bit.
But again, we're arguing that there should have been a rear aperture sight right here.
Right.
If they had put the rear sight right at the rear of the bridge, you'd have been done. So, okay, so no cock on open, no rear aperture, obviously not the gun for you, right? So there's no need for you to describe maybe actually firing and handling it other than just gushing at us.
No, he's right. I need to not gush. For shooting, like I said, it's a decent V-notch, very clean read. Again, wish it were taller, different sight, but hey, still not bad for what it is. The trigger, I said, is a beautiful 2-stage trigger. It was actually pretty much the same as the Ottoman 93 in terms of smoothness, long take up, very light long take up, and then, a solid second stage to that trigger, very short pull through on that part, pretty decent. Again, smooth all the way through. Cycling action is always very smooth. Actually, this one, you can bear down on it. It takes a lot of force of bearing down in order to cause that bolt to drag, which was nice.
This has had the least wear, too.
Oh, yeah, which is really, honestly great that I'm getting it in such a fine condition. Again, thank you, John. This was magnificent. And I was fairly accurate with this gun, too. It performance-wise, this was everything I wanted to... this was almost all the changes I would have made to the Ottoman 93 are in this gun.
Yeah, I'm going to say that I agree with May. The gun is very handy, semi-pistol grip stock, Mauser action, 7x57mm gives me almost the lightness of a 6.5, at least trends in that direction, but I still get much better penetration than a 6.5. And so there are places where that can come in handy. I get it out of this gun, and yet I don't have to deal with 30-06 coming bearing down on me like a freight train. If we're talking in terms of May's preferences, again, like I said, if it had a rear aperture sight, a cock-on open action, and I should say a single-stage trigger, you tend to like the really old single stages, then you would have been calling this the perfect gun ever made. This would be as if it was designed out of your fantasy book, right? In my case, I say that it is a very high contender in terms of its size and cartridge. I also tend to prefer cock-on open, but I don't find cock-on closed to be as debilitating, but I also have a bit more upper body to throw at the problem. I would agree.
So where is it in your top then? So is it like in the top 10, top 5?
I haven't even gotten through my list yet.
Oh,
all right?
I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Rear aperture sight, yes, would have been an advantageous addition. And unfortunately, I still prefer generally the configuration of the Arisaka action over the Mauser action. There's a couple things that are really deep down in this that it doesn't have. Not necessarily present on the Arisaka either is the Mauser 98 sort of planed surfaces for the extractor that allow the extractor to loosen or tighten depending on the situation. That is a super useful thing to have. But we are getting dang close to an ideal short rifle. You know, it could add maybe another 2 inches and get a sort of universal short rifle pattern going. But realistically, at the combat ranges that we saw, this is going to get almost everything done. Like, it really is very good. Now, in terms of World War I, there's something it's missing that you haven't noted on and that we don't talk a lot about in this show, which is that it does not have a bayonet lug. This was for cavalry use. And sadly, as we've seen, especially in that quote from last episode, bayonets actually did get used. There were times when you needed to go to hand-to-hand fighting, and so this does not give you that advantage. But I feel like that would be a very easy thing to fix. If you want to see a gun similar to this, although longer and more of a universal short rifle, again, Swedish 94. That's actually pretty comparable in a lot of ways. Not every way, but certainly in that same category of very good short rifle / carbine, although not quite carbine style for that gun. So you're saying that this is near your top one. Do I need to ask you if you're going to take it to war? Is that like, I feel like we've gotten way ahead of that question right at the beginning of this.
We may have, and unfortunately I didn't mean to, give that impression that early on, but it's true. There's just so much positivity with this one in terms of growth, what I would have loved to have seen in other guns that I've had to turn down or put into this wavery category of, yeah, but I don't want to take it. This one is very, very, very high up on my list. And like I said, it's so high up that it's going to have me sit down and evaluate very strongly what is my top 5 list, because this one's definitely in it. So I need to figure out, it's made me have to reconsider what isn't anymore.
Yeah, it's something we'll probably have to do as we clear 100 episodes, because that's coming up very soon too.
Ooh.
So, we'll put together a list very soon. But for now, yeah, the Serbian 1908 is an extremely good rifle. The Serbian 99 is also an extremely good rifle. It's just a bit more of a common rifle for that period, which is that it's a Spanish 93-esque with minor improvements and overall a strong and competent action, but a bit heavy and a bit awkward in places. Still very high contenders, some of the best rifles of the war, and yet they're sitting in little old humble Serbia. So you never know what you'll find in the strangest corners, and sometimes it's worth it to dig up the really rare stuff, because who would have thought, right? I mean, most of our audience probably wasn't even aware of this gun before we started this episode. It's a very odd and rare piece. Okay. All right, so we're going to keep trying our little sign-off, right? But we're not actually experts. We're just determined idiots. So stay tuned after the credits for any updates, and have a good one.
Bye, everybody.
I was hoping to have a more descriptive update ready by now for Project Lightning, which is launching very, very soon. on Valentine's Day, but unfortunately I am slammed with work to actually get the project ready on time. Now, for those of you who are curious, this will run for 4 weeks across 2 of your favorite channels and have lots of fresh content. Now, in order to do all this, I had to put the pedal to the metal, and unfortunately, episode 95 of Primer will not be airing on time. I need to work in a 2-week break so that I can, well, frankly, recover, and then also go ahead and film some of these other light machine guns for Primer episodes while they are in town before they go home. So I apologize for the gap, but there will be plenty of content from Ian and I both during that same period. I hope that makes up for it. Alright, stay tuned for the funniest thing I think I've ever seen to come out of Rock Island Auction.